Welcome home. We are WNST, Towson, Baltimore, AM 1570, Baltimore Positive. We are into another week. The Ravens remain 0-1. They'll have a chance to fix that. I saw the Raiders play last week, so I have a feeling things could go well this week. But the baseball team, they were the sure thing back in April and May and June, and then things happened, and then they start playing weak teams, Labor Day time, and a little homestand. Luke Jones has been down there. He has been in Owings Mills when they allow him, and he'll be doing double duty all week long as the Birds head off to Baston, and they're not hitting the ball, dude. I've had more oysters than they've had hits this week. That's for sure.
No question about it. We talked about this with the last game of the White Sox series. It ended in disappointing fashion, and they scored 2 runs on Friday night, which was good enough for a win because Dean Kramer came back unexpectedly, right? I think we all assumed he was at least going to miss a start, if not going on the IL, and he pitches well on Friday night.
Dude, I put the game on, and he's standing there, and I'm like, how did he do that? I saw his arm. That was amazing that he pitched.
Sure. And Yennier Cano with some great bullpen work, Sir Anthony Dominguez, good bullpen work, and they win Friday night. And you say, okay, hey, you win a 2-0 game. You do have to do that sometimes. As much as we've talked about the offense needing to pick it up, you're going to have to win some games like that at least once in a while. So they did that. And then Saturday, Zach Eflin, not as good as he's been, but wasn't horrendous. And they score 1 run. Now they end up, the Rays end up winning going away because the bullpen didn't pitch as well Saturday. And then Sunday you have a chance. Your ace is on the hill. We've talked about Corbin Burnes. Was it dominant, best version of Corbin Burnes that we've seen on Sunday in terms of a lot of strikeouts and all of that? No, but he gave up a 2-run homer, and that was it. And they lose 2-0 because they did nothing offensively. So you score 3 runs over the course of a series, you're lucky you didn't get swept. So let's call it what it was. It was a lost weekend for the Orioles and a homestand that began with knowing you were going to play the White Sox and the Rays, who have fallen out of the race, right? They've hovered right around 500 for it feels like most of the season at this point in time. They traded away guys at the deadline, including Zach Eflin. And
a fun weekend for them to play spoiler, though, right? Really?
Sure. Yeah. I don't think the Tampa Bay Rays care about such things. Being the kind of organization that they are, analytics and roster churn and all that. But yeah, sure. They like doing that, especially after the Orioles edged them out for the division last September. But you got to swing the bats. And over the course of this homestand, basically the Orioles had 3 guys swing the bat: Cedric Mullins, Gunnar Henderson, and Austin Slater. No one else really did much of anything. So, disappointing 3-3 homestand against the White Sox and the Rays. If you and I were talking early on Labor Day last week, we would have said that that's really disappointing. But you know what? It's much of the same. This has been a 500 team since late June, and well, they played like a 500 team over the course of the homestand, and now they go to Boston, a half game behind the New York Yankees in the AL East.
I think when I evaluate the team, and correct me if I'm wrong, in your mind, it's almost like they had like 3 teams, right? Like they had the team that was really good in April and May that was coming on, that was hopeful about Means and Bradish and like all of those guys that are dead to this team. They're gone. They're just gone. And then there was the trading deadline period where you're like, all right, we got some guys we want to switch in, some guys we want to switch out. It felt very wholesale, right? It made a lot of changes for a first place team, right? They really did. And you say Austin Slater to me, and you say Zach Eflin to me, and you say Sir Anthony Dominguez to me, and you say Gregory Soto to me, and you say Eloy Jimenez. These are all guys that have pitched, hit, had at-bats, had strikeouts, had home runs, like all of the above. But it's not the same team anymore. And then the injuries hit, right? Then you take injuries into account, the late injuries, Westberg, Mateo, Urias, just go through the list of all the injuries. It's just such a different team, and it's got a different energy about it. I don't know that the fans have shown up, and I keep talking about that, and I'm not Mike Loxley, by the way. We'll talk about that later too. Because of the price of all of this. I couldn't go to Springsteen and the Terps and the Orioles and I can't do all of that. I can only do one thing. So picking all of this stuff, But the baseball team and the football team starts, and they play a game on noon on Sunday on Roku that I can't even watch. And I'm like, there's 8 other football games I can watch. It's kickoff weekend. So there's just a little part of the baseball thing where it's gotten a little more quiet around town for orange flags and we're going to win the World Series and all that. But the injury part of this and the infusion of guys that I don't even know, Austin Slater, Eloy, I mean, they weren't the guys I fell in love with. I fell in love with Mullins and Hayes and guys that are gone. But this is just a different team. And it feels like this isn't the team they went to spring training with. And I'm not saying that that's the way it has to be. And this team might win the World Series 6 weeks from now because it could. And I will still I'll die on that hill that, they're not hitting this week. They're capable of hitting. We know that. I mean, this isn't a soft hitting team. This is a team that can score 10 runs any night. Um, I just I fear that there's a continuity issue here. I'm not around the team. They don't give me a press pass. But to be around there and to feel different humans come in and to see that this doesn't feel like the same energy from 4 months ago in regard to who the players are, how they interact. Half the guys are gone, either through injury or through you're not good enough anymore, or we don't want you to play, or we want to deal you off. It's just a different team. And when I put it on and I see it and I feel it, it feels very different than it did in July. The energy around it feels different for me. I mean, even the squirters and the Cal Ripken and like all of that excitement that dugout had in April and May and June and all of last year, it feels like they're Barry Manilow trying to get the feeling back again, and that's going to start with hitting the ball because I don't think they're ever going to pitch well,
Well,
consistent.
I mean, well, then it's not going to be an October run then. I mean, you're going to have to pitch well. You're going to have to pitch well to some degree. And in all honesty, if you look back over the last 3 to 4 weeks, I think the pitching's been a little bit better than you think in that regard, right? In terms of what the actual performance has been compared to perception. Now, that said, there's still the questions about it. Danny Coulom's starting a rehab assignment this week. Jacob Webb's going to make at least one more rehab appearance for AAA Norfolk. Grayson Rodriguez is throwing bullpens now, so he's getting closer and closer to going out on a rehab assignment. Again,
Dude,
it's
all
going to
those
be
guys are on the field with the Shadows October 3rd. That'll feel more like the real team to me.
sure, and that's still what we're holding on to at this point. I mean, if you're an Orioles fan, that's still what you're holding on to at this point. But I mean, the offense, there's still too much hyperbole out there. I still have people. I made a comment at the end of the game on Sunday that it was a woeful offensive series, and someone, had 3 different people say it's been a woeful couple months for the offense. It hasn't been that bad for that long, but over the last 4 or 5 weeks, yeah, it's really fallen off. And this last week and specifically this weekend series was terrible.
Well, good. Maybe they'll hit the ball next month.
But a lot of what you just said, Nestor. I mean, you talk about the feeling. Does the feeling create the winning, or does the winning create the feeling? Right? I think it's the winning creates the feeling much more so than the alternative. And the reality is, with what you mentioned, a lot of that can't be helped right now. I mean, you look at their rotation. Bradish, Means, Wells aren't coming through that door, obviously. You look at the offense. I mean, Jordan Westberg is starting to pick up baseball activity, right? I mean, he's been doing ground balls, things of that, like one-handed activity for a while. He's now starting to throw and play catch and start to do some things with his right hand, the one that had the fracture. So that's good to see. I just mentioned the guys that are beginning rehab assignments, but Jorge Mateo's not coming back. And I'm not saying that he was crucial to their success. Ramon Arias is off crutches and feeling better. That sounds way better than I thought it was a week ago. A week ago, I was wondering if he was done for the season. It sounds like, he's going to have a chance to get back later this month, but it's a sprained ankle that had him on crutches for, I don't know what it was, 4 or 5 days. I mean, that's, it's not coming back in 5 days after that. He's going to have to ramp it back up. So, I mean, the reality is they had to look for reinforcements, right? I mean, we've been talking about the bullpen and the need to add to that since before spring training. I mean, I was talking about that back in March. So they did that, and some of it's worked out well. Other parts of it have not worked out well, but I'm going to go back to, and it's going to sound like I'm picking on the guy. Well, then I'm picking on him. Adley Rutschman needs to start playing better, or he needs to be lowered in the lineup, and maybe he needs to sit if he's hurt. He says he's not hurt. Brandon Hyde has said he's not hurt, but Since July 1st, Nestor, Adley Rutschman, the all-star catcher, the face of the franchise who was drafted 5 years ago, face of the franchise instantly, right? 3 years before he made his major league debut. Since July 1st, he's batting 181 with a 276 on base percentage and a 269 slugging percentage. He has 3 home runs since July 1st. It's a long time ago. It was over 2 months ago. He's been below replacement level for over 2 months now. I mean, this is more than a slump. Gunnar Henderson slumped in August, right? Corbin Burnes had a bad August, no question about it, right? And we've talked about those guys needing to pick it up, and we've seen Burnes look better in his first couple September starts, and Gunnar Henderson's been hitting the ball and hitting at a high level again. But I mean, Adley Rutschman needs to pick it up. He talked after the game on Sunday, and he just wants to keep it focused on the team. It's like, hello, Adley. How the team goes, how you perform is a big factor in how the team's going to go. That's the Bull
Durham leadership that they've been taught. That's the Bull Durham leadership that I'm not here to talk about the past. I'm Bull. Like that's what Chad Steele and Greg Bader want them to do. And
no, I disagree with that. I hear plenty of guys, whether we're talking about Ravens or Orioles, that will take accountability and say, I need to pick it up. And look, let me be clear. At the end of the day, it's optics, right? Talking to the media is not the same as being accountable to your teammates. He's putting in work. There's all of that, right? I'm not doubting that, but sometimes your fan base wants to hear a guy when he's been terrible, when he's been below replacement level, when he's been one of the worst 10 qualified hitters in Major League Baseball over the last 2+ months. It doesn't hurt to say, I really need to pick it up for my team. I'm better than this. I'm not playing up to my capability. Dude, that's something
when Luke Jones is at the locker after a game and wants to see more leadership out of a leader, then that is what it is. I mean, good for you. I mean, I'm not there to see it.
And I just said,
just in a general sense, they don't allow me to come in and have observations and ask questions and whatever. Your observations are gold to me. And when you're pissed off about it, and when you don't like the answers you're hearing, when you don't like the accountability you're getting, from a 24? These are young people.
He's 25.
These are really young people. And these are young people, in his case, who's never failed at anything. You know what I mean? It's like Lamar failing. Lamar's never failed. He doesn't know how to fail. That's why he pounds on the ground and acts like an 11-year-old when he loses. And gets mad at people in Pennsylvania on Twitter and tells them to perform acts that aren't cool. So, like, there's an immaturity about being immature and being 24 or 25 that's built in. But then there's also oh my God, I'm the best player on the team. There's pressure and I'm not performing. What do I say? What do I do? And if he's hurt, he's not admitting it. So then there's an honesty issue. And if he's hurt, he wouldn't be playing, I guess. I guess everybody else is hurt.
I push back on that a little bit. I mean, there are plenty of guys over the years that play injured. So for me, it's not a dishonesty thing. It's, there's a competitive part of this. There's a not wanting to make excuses part to this. And look, I would not be shocked if we find out at the end of the year that Adley Rutschman was playing through something. But the point is, if he's out there, if he's in the lineup, if he's hitting second in the lineup, like he's been of late after they had dropped him in the order a few weeks back, he's got to play. He's got to perform. And look, Adley Rutschman owes me as a reporter, doesn't owe me anything. But if you're a fan and you hear his post-game interview on Sunday, that's really uninspiring. I mean, it just is. And again, at the end of the day, that doesn't mean he's not accountable to his teammates. It doesn't mean that he's not putting in work, trying to turn it around. Okay, so we're not suggesting the guy's jaking it or that he doesn't realize he's not playing well. He knows. I mean, you saw the frustration in his 8th inning at bat when he strikes out with 2 guys on base. As animated as we've seen him. But for me, it's okay to acknacknowledge that you're not playing.
Well, I didn't see it because I don't have Roku, but I'm not being a dick. I don't have Roku, but go ahead.
Roku,
I wasn't watching.
The one thing I'll say about Roku, you don't have to sign up for anything. You literally download the app and watch it. Among those things, just like the Eagles-Packers game Friday night was on Peacock, where you have to subscribe or sign up, even if you get a trial, whatever.
Went to Cooper's North because they're a great sponsor and they have Dumbo.
There you go. But Roku is actually at least free. I don't know if it'll continue to be free like in the future, and we'll see. But again, and I don't want to belabor the post-game interview part of it. The problem is he's not performing, and he's not performing like this isn't. He's been middling, or he's hitting 250 over the last 6 weeks, right? I mean, he's been below replacement level. You know, this isn't quite Chris Davis in 2018. It's not anywhere like that, but it's closer to that than being an all-star catcher. That's how bad he's been the last 2 months. So, I mean, he's got to pick it up. You can't have one of your best players being not just not his best, but terrible. He's been terrible at the plate since early July. So the numbers don't lie,
Well, I
right?
mean,
And
Jackson
there are other
Holiday's still
guys that need
batting
to
a buck
pick it up, but
76. Like I'm looking up and down the lineup here. Mullins is at 234. It's September. This is what's going to be on the back of the bubblegum card, right? Like this is where we are.
Cedric Mullins but go look at his splits since he was terrible the first 2.5 months. He's actually been pretty good. I mean, he's actually been one of their better players. Now he's become much more of a platoon player. And he's not really playing much against left-handed starters, so his role has changed a little bit. Obviously, with Kowser's ability to play center field when Mullins isn't in the lineup, but again, there are other guys. I get that, but this guy's a two-time All-Star. The reason I'm bringing him up is because the expectations have been so high. He's been so good. That's why what he's done over the last going on 2.5 months now is alarming. It's been that bad. So, we can talk all we want about pitchers coming back and getting guys back from injuries and needing guys to do this in October. I mean, it starts with Adley Rutschman looking like Adley Rutschman again, doesn't it? I mean, it has to. Kyle Bradish isn't coming back. Felix Bautista's not coming back, despite the fact that he's throwing bullpens and people continue to wonder, even though the Orioles have been adamant and saying, no, he's not pitching in October. He's not an option for October. But if Adley Rutschman is going to be in the lineup, he's got to perform, right? Because I'm perplexed by how poor he's been for this long now. I mean, I really am. So that's when you ask, and he was asked multiple times in the postgame clubhouse, by 8 reporters sitting there. He was asked 2 or 3 times about his individual struggles, and he just says, for me, I'm just focused on the team. And it's like, Adley, that's great. And that sounds awesome when you're performing at a really high level and you want to keep the focus on your team because you don't want to draw too much attention to yourself. But when you're one of the reasons why the team has scuffled the way it has, and he absolutely is, it might be a good thing to acknowledge that. Now, some fans won't care about that. And again, I'm talking about optics at the end of the day. What really matters for the Orioles and their success is not that Adley Rutschman gives the right quote to the media. It's for him to pick up his play.
Well, it's optics of leadership that all these years later, we
Sure.
can talk about Ripken a little bit. I mean, Ripken was perceived to be this leader. They stayed in different hotels. I was around the team. I'm a Cal guy, but I don't know that Cal was a little bit, by the time I got there, we're talking 91, 92. So he was 8, 9. He was already going to the Hall of Pretty Good by the time I got there. He'd already had the 89 season. He's already into the streak, all of that. He was already 1,500 games into the streak or whatever it was at that point. He wasn't the leader of the team. I mean, Sutcliffe sort of, usurped that when he showed. I mean, leadership, it happens. It doesn't. You don't say you're a leader. You're not anointed. You become that guy because you're respected in the room. I mean, you don't point at the leaders. The cosmos points to the leaders, right? And with him, I think there was a leadership part of him from the minute he came, patting guys on the asses. There was a hustle about him. There was an energy about him. There was something Pete Rose-ish about him, something different, something sort of a little extra ball player, gamer, all that stuff. I don't know. That energy really fed a lot 2.5 years ago, right? When he came up in May and things changed and they stopped losing. And for you to put more pressure on him, I'm down with that, because we didn't see that of young Gunnar Henderson, who struggled when he came up, or poor little Jackson Holliday, who I said to Rasig last week when we had him out at Coco's that if Rasig was going to draw him like a cartoon, he'd draw him like a little leaguer, because that's what he looks like. His suits don't fit. He buys a shirt out of a box and puts it on and goes to a Four Seasons event. It was pretty obvious. So there's just a lot of young here. There's nobody that's been up the mountain. McCann, right. Maybe, some of these guys that have been around a little bit. Corbin Burns has pitched a playoff game. Eflin's been a part of some October, this and that. But these are imported guys to some degree. When I look at the team, if you and I were in Sarasota back in March, Rutschman had to be the leader, right? Like maybe there's a point where Henderson will be that guy. He's making commercials and like all of that, but Rutschman's the face of the organization until you tell me otherwise, like to your point. And this is a point where like this thing fades out in the next couple of weeks. They're all going to get blamed for it, right? Like there's going to be plenty of you didn't win a playoff game again in October. If they don't win a playoff game again in October,
Right.
they're going to have to pound sand on that. But this was such a promising year that's had so many things go awry, go wrong, injuries. The football season started. That was going to happen anyway. It was going to take some attention off. But there's, still 6 more games they're going to play this week before the Ravens play the Raiders on Sunday at home. And Boston, Detroit this weekend. These are winnable games. But I don't know that when I look at the team, when I look at the stats, when I look at the lineup, I'm uninspired by all of it lately as we get into September. And I do think to myself, how are they in first place? And or a game out or half game, whatever they are today, tomorrow, based on what the Yankees do. It's really been kind of amazing the last 2 months that they've been so and they're still going to be a playoff team and they're still going to have a chance. I just hope that they can get this cavalry together over the next 3 weeks because if they had to start the playoffs this week, I would not feel good about them.
No, I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, so much of the optimism that remains for October is based on the projection of getting some of those guys back, and that doesn't mean and we know the usual suspects, right? I mean, we've been talking about them for weeks. It's in the case of someone like Danny Coulomb, we've been talking about him for months. But they're still in the meantime, they're still looking at the guys that are active on the roster, and again, if a month from now or 6 weeks from now, it comes out that Adley Rutschman was playing with an injury, I wouldn't be shocked. But we can only go off of what he and Brandon Hyde have said, that he's healthy. So if he's healthy, then how is he not performing better than what we've seen since early July? I mean, this is not, I'm not, I'm not splitting hairs here over someone that had a 240 month. I mean, this has been going on since early July, right? I mean, July was the worst month of his career statistically. August ended up being, by OPS, his 3rd worst month of his career. The second being his first month in the majors. And he's off to a really slow start in September now. So, again, am I picking on him a little bit? Well, he's a 2-time All-Star.
We've been talking about him for a month, though. I mean,
right, exactly. This is not what Gunnar Henderson went through in August. That's more, he slumped, right? And now we're seeing Gunnar has come out of it, and he's looking like Gunnar Henderson again, and broke the Orioles record for home runs by a shortstop in a season, and lead off.
The other thing that's going on here, there's a fatigue factor for guys that start this in February that are catchers, even when they're 24 years old. That we saw Buck Showalter ride Matt Wieters like a mule for years, and
but he hasn't caught as much this year. I mean, he hasn't caught as much this year as he had in the past. And I think people kind of looked at that. One, early in the year, there was a lot of hand-wringing about James McCann can't hit. Why is he playing so much? And, we've talked about this, and I was trying to stress the idea that you got to keep in mind when Adley Rutschman's not catching, he's still DHing frequently. Now, we're not seeing that as much over the last 6 weeks because of how much he struggled. But the point was, you were trying to pace him for the second half of the season when he presumably would catch more frequently. And, that conversation has changed from the standpoint of just how much he struggled. And just for clarity, he's 26. I mean, he's going to be 27 in February. I mean, that's not that young. I mean, it's just the truth, and they need him. The reason why I'm bringing him up is because he's that important. I don't expect Eloy Jimenez to do that much. There's a reason why the White Sox gave him away, because he was terrible for them earlier this year. He's been okay. He hasn't hit for much power, but I have different expectations for Eloy Jimenez or Austin Slater or
but they bring
Nick
in these
Maton.
sort of washed up right-handed bats because they needed them, and needing them and bringing them in and having them be productive is just different,
Sure. And that's where, and we've mentioned it in passing, and again, we'll move off of Adley Rutschman because it's not just him, but it is a massive part, and you could argue is the biggest part in terms of guys that are actually on the field, right? And Craig Kimbrell, we've talked about him plenty as well, right? As far as what he's being paid and what he isn't offering in the bullpen. But
there'll be plenty of blame for Elias for
they
guys that Elias brought in that haven't performed.
I mean, they missed Jordan Westberg. I mean, let's look at that split as well, specifically with their offense, which obviously struggled more so in August and has remained up and down in September. Had some big performances this month, but also a weekend like they just experienced where they had scored 3 runs in 3 games. But with Jordan Westberg, that's where they've struggled in terms of not having enough impact right-handed bats in their lineup on a nightly basis. And they miss him. I mean, they do. And then it hurt even more when Ramon Arias played as admirably as he did in place of Westberg, essentially, and he goes down with a sprained ankle. So, it's tough. And again, the injuries are such a big part of this. Again, I'm not trying to make it out to be that it's all about Adley Rutschman. Let me be clear on that. It's just, he spoke Sunday. He doesn't make himself available a ton to talk to reporters. And when he talked, as listening to that as Luke, the Orioles fan 25 years ago, I would have been woefully uninspired by that. And that's my point.
By the way,
and I'll leave it at
I
that.
still have a few friends in the media, even though, you don't know this because I'm never in the press box next to you. But this time I ran into some media people around town, names of people that you know and the people know. And I chatted with them about the Oriole clubhouse because I haven't been in the Oriole clubhouse in 18 years. And they like it that way. So the Rutschman thing, I did ask, like, that seems like a good room, I said to this particular reporter. And the reporter looked at me, he's like, well, Rutschman's not, I mean, he literally singled out Rutschman. He's like, Rutschman doesn't want to deal with the media. Rutschman doesn't want to talk to anybody. Rutschman's like that, he's been coached up to Bull Durham it, and he's not the first guy out to talk to the media. That's what a media member told me. I don't know. You can speak to, you say he doesn't talk much. And I'm like, it's baseball. They're there every night, right? That's the way it used to be. But if they don't talk much and you can't go up and say hello to them and that's what it is, then, that's reportable too, that he doesn't talk much, because I don't know what he does or does. I don't hear him talk much. I don't see the same enthusiasm I saw 2.5 years ago from the same rah, I'm here. Let's go. I'm a leader. Baltimore, we're going to win. I'm in it with you. We're in it with me. We're going to catch balls and be boring. And we're going to be the bank. And we're, like, I'm going to make commercials. I'm going to, like, I don't know. You're not going to make anything if you don't win a playoff game next month and you got 5 months to pound on that. I mean, Lamar kind of went away and hid for 8 months too, because nobody likes to lose at the end and have to show up and talk about losing at the end in the playoffs. So for the team trying to sell enthusiasm in the offseason, get me to buy tickets again, get the Orange Club, and they're going to get an all-star game, and they're going to have season tickets and all that stuff. Speaking to the media, not that important. Speaking to the fans, really important. And that's what Greg Bader and Chad Steele have never understood. It's about ego, and it's about high school, and it's about no. It's about the fans. You don't like empty seats on your Roku game on noon when everybody was staying home to watch football, or going to stand stock, or hung over from Springsteen, or heading down to the Killers, or doing all the stuff that was available to all of us all weekend. The baseball team's got to make you want to come. And I'm going to tell the Whistler that. I'm going to tell Mr. Rubenstein that. I don't know if you read my Eric DaCosta letter, but I'm getting a little spicy around here this time. These teams are supposed to be winning championships right now, and I'm going to hold them accountable to that.
Sure. I'm not going to disagree.
Adley Rutschman should be available anytime that the media wants Adley Rutschman in Baltimore.
I mean,
again, in a small market where they're selling tickets.
But I don't want to make this about the media. He needs to play better.
He does.
I mean, that's what's important.
And he needs to answer when he does and doesn't. He needs to be available before and after. Ripken was available before and after. I can promise you that. Cal Ripken was available every day, every night, before games, after games. Sometimes he didn't like the answer. Sometimes he didn't have a lot of time. But he was I just talked about whether he was a leader or not. But the leadership shows itself in a lot of ways. But Rutschman has to be the leader. He has to be. He's the C on the sweater. He's the catcher. He's the 1-1. He changed everything here, too. I know he has the capability. I've seen it. I don't think he's a leader. I know he's a leader. I've watched it.
Right. And and again, I don't want to make this just about a post-game interview, and I'm not trying to, I was kind of
It's
veering off
about his
doing.
performance the last 2 months. It is. It
Yeah,
is.
yeah, and again, that leadership comes with needing to perform, right?
But it's
You might
about
have.
every facet of this when you give him $50 million, right? It's the same thing with Lamar Jackson. Nobody cared about anything, about all the stupid stuff he did, the driving issues, the off the field, this, that, nobody cared about any of that. They just care that he plays. But when you give him $50 million, you're expecting him not to do stupid stuff. Like you really are. You're
I
expecting
don't
them
know how
to
we got
be
off
the
talking
best of
about
the best.
Lamar
No, I'm just
Jackson,
saying because
who
Adley
just won
Rutschman's trying to
MVP,
get
by the
paid.
way.
Adley Rutschman's trying to get paid. So they're trying to be generational $400 million ball player. Like literally, that's what we think of Adley. That's what we've thought the last 2.5 years. Maybe our feelings are changing about that, right? Like, I don't know who's going to get all the money here, but I know that Rutschman, Henderson, maybe Westberg, I don't know, Holiday, I guess at some point, Mayo, maybe. But these are the guys that I I have to see them out in front of this. I have to believe they're a part of this. Mr. Rubenstein and Mike Elias need to make them a part of this. They need to be on the side of the warehouse. And we need to have 35, 40,000 people down at the ballpark more often. And part of that is recruiting everybody. That's where I am. When you hide from the media, you're not recruiting anybody. That's all I'm saying.
Fair enough. I mean, I said my piece at the beginning of our conversation. I didn't think we were coming back to this, but I mean, he's got to play better. That's the issue. It's not talking to Luke Jones and seven other reporters. But if he is going to be asked a question about his struggles, which was more than fair game, to just deflect and not acknowledge whatsoever that you individually aren't performing. When I hear that, if I'm thinking as a fan, that's pretty uninspiring. But that said, that's not to suggest that he's jaking it or that he's not accountable to his teammates or that he's not putting in the work to get out of this, to snap out of this. You saw the frustration in the eighth inning, but well, it is what it is. Like I said, he's been a bottom 10 hitter in baseball, qualified hitter in baseball over the last 2+ months in terms of look at batting average, OPS, weighted runs created. I mean, any analytical stat you want to look at, he's been very poor offensively since early July. And it's so unlike Adley Rutschman that, yeah, we do have questions about it. So when you hear, and look, I don't expect him to sit there for 10 minutes and break down every element of his swing that he's working on right now. But, when you won't even acknowledge, hey, I need to pick it up. Again, that it sounds uninspiring, but
Again, a lot of these guys are guys that
play
have
better.
never failed. Like guys that are 1-1s. They're a different kind of guitar player. That's all I'm going to say. Luke Jones is here. He's Baltimore Luke. The Orioles are in Boston. He's monitoring it. I'm monitoring it. We're going to be monitoring everything into October, and the Ravens are playing this week as well. You can find Luke at Baltimore Luke. You can find both of us at Baltimore Positive. You can find me on Friday at the Fells Point Oyster Festival. I will have a handful of Gold Rush Sevens doublers to give away, but I'm also going to have the Ravens scratch-offs, which I have not gotten in my hot little hands yet. We'll have those Friday. We're going to be there early, about 11 to 3. Got Springsteen in town. Styx is in town. Lawrence Gowan from Styx did a half an hour with me. You're going to hear that this week as well. You might hear some throwback Nils Lofgren as well as some JY. You might even hear Dennis DeYoung before the week's over as well. I could not line up Jeff Ament from Pearl Jam this week, but I am going to be partying with them on Thursday. I'm doing 26 oysters in 26 days in 26 ways, and I'm pretty good at oysters with an egg on Sunday. Don't sneer at me, Luke. It was better than it sounded. It was really, really delicious. Fried. It was fantastic at the Urban Oyster. So I've been getting out and about. You can follow along on our social media as well as at Baltimore Positive. I'll have the stuff up later in the week. But we are 26 years into this, and I'm promoting the Oyster Recovery Partnership, which is when they have the shells in the other little bag at Fadley's and at Costas and other places. Those shells get turned into what becomes sort of the sand at the bottom of the Chesapeake that makes crabs happen, and that makes the crab cakes delicious at places like Coco's, where I was last week. The Maryland Crab Cake Tour is in session with our friends at the Maryland Lottery in conjunction with our friends at Jiffy Lube and Liberty Pure Solutions, keeping all of our water crystal clean. We're going to be at Fadley's on the 20th. Luke and I are going to be down there before the big game against the Tigers. A lot of games against Tigers here the next couple of weeks as well. We're going to be at the State Fair in Catonsville on the 24th in the afternoon. Angela Alsterbrooks, Prince George's County Executive running for Senate, is going to join us. For those of you Larry Hogan fans, Larry Hogan has an invitation. We're going to try to get him out, as does Wes Moore. We are going to be on the 26th at the B&O Railroad Museum doing the Oyster Recovery Partnership Gala. And then we're going to be at Costas on the 27th having crab cakes and oysters. As Jimmy Buffett once sang, give me oysters and beer for dinner every day of the year, and I'll be fine. I'll be just fine. He's Luke. I'm Nestor. We're WNST. Lots of baseball, lots of football, lots of great stuff. Mark Viviano joined us. It's going to be a good week of radio here as we get ready for the Las Vegas Raiders. I'm still getting used to calling them the Oakland Raiders after calling them the Los Angeles Raiders. But I saw the Los Angeles Chargers of San Diego playing in LA yesterday, so I know better.